Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hello, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Austin.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. Today we're going to be going over a Sylvia Plath poem. We have gone over three of them, Daddy, Lady Lazarus, and Cut, and all three of them have been very well received. So we're going to be going over another one, and that poem is Tulips. I have a discussion starter, and that has to do with the influence that being in an institution had on this work, and in turn, what one can get out of the experience of reading the poem. As I made mention to, Plath wrote this poem about her experiences of being in an institution. The discussion starter that I wanted to bring up is, what kind of explanation can you give about her reaction to the tulips that were by the window in her hospital room?
I would say that I think that what they represent is kind of life, primarily, and her family also. I think that those are the two things that are bringing her this sense of discomfort.
It's definitely the reminder of there's things outside this cocoon that she's created for herself. Because I work in a hospital environment, I've worked in a hospital environment for years, and the one thing that I would definitely tell you, white as snow is not exactly, I mean, everything's clean. There's a difference between sterile, as in like, from a biological level, and the sterility that she was talking about. That's a word, sterility. It's a word now. This sterile environment of everything is white as snow and stuff like that. The room, the sheets, the gown that she's in. There's a vast difference between that. So that metaphorical cocoon that she created of that white purity versus these like very loud, very red flowers. So it reminds of the rushing of blood, life. Life outside that room, life as in there's nature, there's life, there's family.
So when I had read this, I didn't know when she had written it or where she was in her life, and then I read after. But I kind of immediately went to the bell jar and the idea of an unsuccessful suicide attempt. And so I had kind of assumed that was kind of where this was coming from. Later I found out that's not exactly what happened.
It was an appendectomy or something.
Yeah, right after she had a miscarriage, then an appendectomy, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So this was written when she was in the hospital for an appendectomy?
Yeah, she was written, it was a surgical procedure, and I think it took a bit of time for her to heal back to like regular health, but I'm fairly certain that was when this was written, around that time.
And it was also shortly after she had had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
So I think going back into the hospital might put her in that state of mind. But
Triggered those thoughts, yeah.
A line that I think was really interesting was the line in the 5th stanza. I didn't want any flowers. I only wanted to lie with my hands turned up and be utterly empty. And I think that really reflects what folks are saying here with this idea that flowers kind of represent, I see it as two things. It kind of represents life, and there's another line about how the flowers were so red that they kind of stung or burned.
It talks to my wound, it corresponds. I love that one.
And
What is it? I'm sorry.
The redness talks to my wound, it corresponds, they are subtle. They seem to float through they weigh me down. So she's talking about the redness and how bright that is.
Okay.
And I think I agree with folks in some ways in that perhaps the flowers can be a reminder of life, and a life that she doesn't seem to want to lead at this point. But I also kind of thought of, from one of my favorite novels, Like Catcher in the Rye, the line, "Who wants flowers when you're dead? No one." Mm-hmm. And I think that for some reason, because I love that book, it reminded me of that, and it also made me think of being in the state of saying, I don't want people to care about me because I want to be free to not exist at this time. And those flowers in some ways can also be a reminder of the connections I have to people. And sometimes that can be, for a lot of people that's really uplifting, but for someone who is kind of thinking, I would rather be lying with my hands upturned totally empty, which we can assume means dead, it's kind of difficult to...
Empty, a void, yeah.
It's kind of difficult to be reminded, like, there are people who really do care about me, and that really hurts me.
I got the idea, I had also I had gotten the impression that it had to do with a mentality issue, like she had had on multiple occasions, because of the fact that where else would you be giving up your name and being just being referred to by number, day clothes, the fact that you had people, the body to the surgeons makes it look different, but why would you'd have anesthesiologists, when you're doing procedures, they knock you out, but you also have the fact that she's craving the bright needles bringing her sleep.
So pain medications to be able to kind of just knock everything out.
You have that, but granted, you also look at Sylvia Plath herself, and most of her poems are driven by madness. And I think that the two of them, she can get to the point where a picture of her husband and child are much more painful to endure, and how
inflammatory. They, like I said, they remind her of a world that she wants. It's idyllic. It's that white picket fence that everybody kind of wants. She doesn't get it. She never gets it. She never can have it in the way and in the sense that she wants it to be. That metaphor. Yeah.
Same thing with the tulips. Granted, I think that there are some images just in general that would put people off on the edge, but to see the tulips, you could see them either as literal tulips and she's just going mad because of them, because there are people that will see a particular image and it would drive them insane, whether it be a house ornament or whatnot, but to see it as a figurative, such as the fact that they resemble a life that she cannot have, and how the tulips are actually in a greater state of freedom than she is, being trapped in a bed and taking directions from people that are working in the hospital.
Yeah. Well, there's also the symbolic redness of them. So red is usually carnal. It has something to do with hunger. It's usually a color that is inciting. It's angry. It's impassioned, and that's the opposite spectrum of where she wants to be. She wants to be languid. She wants to be void. She wants to be left alone and isolated in this creation of her own little hospital room where just faceless nurses come in and out, and it doesn't matter who it is. She just wants to be left alone. She wants to be
and
left.
cared for. I think.
Yeah.
And the tulips are like a Venus flytrap, more so, the fact that it's a dangerous animal too, but as if it's the predator and she's the prey.
Exactly.
And you have to figure out whether it is, whether there's an explanation that can be made, or if it's just in her head, which as a reader, that you have to look at her point of view too, but I would say that all of it's in her head.
Well, she even says that that kind of being alone versus you actually watch her thought process from wanting to be alone, wanting to be isolated, and then she blames the flowers for being there, for reminding her of what living is, and then it kind of turns. And
what doesn't she blame in her poems?
Basically. That now, nobody watched me before, now I am watched, the tulips turn to me, and the window behind me, where once a day the light slowly widens and slowly thins. So now all of a sudden, it's kind of almost that acceptance of, okay, I'm going to have to snap back to reality.
Yeah.
And you actually watch that thought process of being able to give in to the void, and then the realization of there are other people, my life isn't just my own, there are consequences to my actions. And that turning, and then she even says, like, even the walls of the cocoon that she's created are slowly turning and becoming these dangerous creatures in this dangerous environment, even on herself. So it's kind of almost like she knows where she has to go, and she hates that fact that she knows within herself that her body is still going to keep on fighting even though she doesn't want to. So.
And that resulted in the termination of her own life. Not very shortly.
3 years after this, or something.
It's like 2, I think.
2 or 3 years
This
after
poem
this.
says
Was this
1950.
published posthumously?
Oh, yeah, 3 years. This was 1960. It was really interesting. Toward the references that she made to her husband and her child, where she said, "My husband and child smiling out of the family photo. Their smiles catch onto my skin like smiling hooks, which I have no idea whether or not you could, whether or not that is a good thing, because just the word hooks in general makes
That's
it.
a very negative, painful feeling to
It
it.
is, yeah, and at least it's annoying, if that, because granted, with Sylvia Plath, you have no idea where she's coming from. She tends to blame everybody for her issues.
Yeah.
Well, I think that line kind of makes sense to me in the idea of almost being able to look at this picture and say, wow, the people who I really care about, even if it's just this one image, like looking at them and seeing them smiling and being genuinely happy and having this feeling of like, I can't do that, I can't feel that, I can't be that way.
Yeah.
And whether or not, I'm sure Sylvia Plath in her lifetime felt genuine happiness, as I'm sure almost everyone does. But in this moment, she might be telling herself like, that is something I will never be able to be as genuinely happy as these folks are, and that itself like almost hurts me, because looking at them and saying these are people I love and I care for, I want to be the best I can for them, and I want to be able to share this happiness with them, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. And I think that's why I don't necessarily see it so much as blaming them, but maybe having that picture and kind of thinking back about herself and saying there's something wrong with me, because I will never be able to match this with them, and I love them so much, I want to do that, but I just don't think I can.
It's almost like a taunt, like look at this, your family's happy, but you're not. And it's also that tie, that lifeline tie to them, saying that like they are always going to be linked to you, that your husband and your child are always going to be linked to you by biology, by marriage, through a life story. So that's kind of like that hook, where it's that lifeline, and she's going to get reeled in. She's going to be eventually pulled back onto the boat, but it may not necessarily be what she wants.
Like a fish.
Like a fish, she feels trapped. So.
Yeah, I think I like that. The idea of it being like a fishing line kind of hook.
Well, that kind of makes me think of, there's a Margaret Atwood poem. It's 2 lines long. It's called "You Fit Into Me Like a Hook into an Eye, an Open Hook, a Fisher's a fishing hook and open eye." I'm sorry, I messed that up. So you fit into me like a hook into an eye, a fishing hook and open eye. And it's kind of like, originally, like a hook and eye it's supposed to mirror that like perfection, that you were meant for me. So this family was meant for her. It's her family, but it causes pain. It causes anguish.
Yeah, existence isn't easy.
Yes,
No, it isn't.
exactly.
And especially for Sylvia Plath, it wasn't easy.
But I think that, and then the line that you read earlier too about the tulips weighing her down. I think it's kind of like the same kind of theme that she's playing with there, or feeling where like her responsibility is greater than her desires.
Mm-hmm.
At this point where, yes, she would rather not continue to exist or to be and to just be free of everything, but she's not capable of realizing that in any sense, and that's becoming evident to her, and so she's being pulled back toward her her lot, her
daily life.
responsibility.
Very much. Does anybody have any other thoughts?
It's a good poem. There.
I don't know what I would say.
It's a poem.
No, anything that could cause us to have a discussion about this kind of stuff is good.
She's good at that. I'll give her that.
It's good making you think, yeah.
But whether or not I would say that I would say that I liked it more than I liked Lady Lazarus, but I don't know where I stand exactly.
Is that the Nazi one? Lady Lazarus, or is that the other one?
Yeah, that's when she referred to the doctors that tried
Daddy
to.
Also has some reference to that.
Yeah, she referred to her daddy as a Nazi because he was German, born from that area, and
Was he a Nazi?
No.
Oh.
I don't think he was. She
he
just
may-
didn't like
He may
him.
have been a sympathizer to the movement, but he died very early because of gangrene.
Yeah.
But that was the.
And it's also, I think it's a very accessible Sylvia Plath poem in that it's very Plathian, I guess. But I also know that some of her other poems do a lot of interesting things with form and structure and the language she uses. And I feel like this poem is pretty straightforward.
It's very
So-
straightforward.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's like there's the straightforward image of her being in the bed, and then there's all these other things you can unpack from it. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it is kind of worth noting that, you know, this is the third discussion, I think, that I've been a part of today, and it's the first time, I think, where we're all exactly on the same page.
Yes. Yes. We are in sync for that. Yeah.
For what that's worth. It's
I will
pretty
leave a link
straightforward.
down below to where you can find this poem. And I thank you for tuning in for another episode. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.